The kingdom of Illumera had long been known for its radiant landscapes, bustling markets, and a court that thrived on elegance and ceremony. At the heart of this realm stood a palace of ivory towers and gilded halls, ruled by King Idris, a monarch whose pride in his own lineage was only rivaled by his admiration for beauty and grandeur. The king's eyes, always seeking perfection, had been captivated not only by the wealth of his kingdom but also by appearances, and it was this obsession with aesthetics that would ultimately shape the fates of those closest to him. Beside him, Queen Malika, the stepmother to the Princess Zafira, masked her ambition behind a carefully cultivated aura of loyalty, grace, and care. Her every gesture, her every word, was crafted to appear selfless, yet beneath the polished exterior simmered jealousy, cunning, and a hunger for influence. Zafira, the king's daughter from a previous union, embodied every virtue and grace that the people admired. She was not only stunning in appearance, with eyes that shone like polished amber and hair cascading like molten silk, but she also possessed a warmth and kindness that made her beloved by everyone from the palace servants to the village elders. Her laughter could light a room, and her compassion was as wide as the kingdom itself, often visiting markets in disguise to help the poor or soothe a frightened child. The citizens whispered her name with affection, and songs of her beauty and benevolence traveled far beyond the borders of Illumera, becoming legend. To Zafira, the world seemed vast, full of possibilities, and she carried within her the unspoken promise of a future where justice, grace, and mercy might guide the realm. But beauty, in its purest and most admired form, often awakens envy, and Queen Malika was consumed by it. She watched Zafira with growing resentment, feeling the shadow of the princess's charm eclipsing her own carefully curated image of power and elegance. Each smile, each kind word from Zafira, each subtle act of goodwill that won the loyalty of the people, fed Malika's insecurities and ambitions. She knew that as long as Zafira lived and flourished, her own influence in the court would be threatened, and the king's attention would remain divided. Thus, she began to plot in secret, seeking a way to erase Zafira's identity and replace it with her own reflected glory. In the deepest chambers of the palace, hidden behind a wall of carved obsidian, lay the forbidden mirror, a relic of ancient magic known to hold powers both dangerous and precise. Its surface shimmered like liquid glass, capturing not only reflections but the essence of those who gazed upon it. Queen Malika, well versed in the dark arts and manipulations of perception, used this mirror to weave a spell so subtle and intricate that it could steal Zafira's face, her very visage, and impose upon her a false one, rendering her unrecognizable to all. One moonless night, she enacted the spell, whispering incantations that trembled through the air like venomous silk. When the magic took hold, the transformation was seamless. The king would see only a familiar, obedient figure, while Zafira, robbed of her identity, found herself cast into shadows, her own face replaced by a phantom mask she did not recognize. The aftermath was immediate and cruel. Zafira, once celebrated and adored, now moved unseen among the servants and forgotten corridors of the palace. Her voice, her beauty, her very presence, became muted in the eyes of all who had once loved her. Meanwhile, Queen Malika paraded through the halls, her false beauty now unchallenged, her smile radiating triumph, and her reflection in the enchanted mirror a constant reminder of stolen innocence. Yet, the very act of tampering with identity and life carried consequences that could not be fully controlled. Whispers of magical imbalance began to stir, subtle disturbances in reflections, faint murmurs in polished glass, and the hint that the mirror itself might one day choose justice. The seed of reckoning had been sown, invisible yet potent, and though Zafira had been forced into exile within her own home, the kingdom itself held a tension that promised the coming of a force both human and mystical, a truth that no spell could forever conceal. Zafira's new life in the shadows was a harsh awakening to the fragility of identity and the cruelty of appearances. No longer recognized as the princess she had been, she moved silently through the palace corridors, keeping her head low and her steps careful. Even the servants, who had once bowed to her warmth and generosity, now regarded her with indifference or suspicion, seeing only a girl with a strange, unfamiliar face. Her beauty and the kindness that had defined her existence were imprisoned behind a mask imposed by her stepmother's magic, rendering her invisible in the eyes of those who mattered most. Hunger, fatigue, and the cold indifference of a court that no longer acknowledged her presence became her daily companions, yet within her, a fire of determination refused to be extinguished. As she wandered beyond the opulent halls and into the quieter corners of Illumera, Zafira began to notice things previously overlooked. The palace, with all its grandeur and glittering gold, was alive in ways ordinary eyes could not perceive. Shadows whispered faintly across the walls, and animals, from the smallest mouse to the palace hounds, reacted to her presence in unexpected ways. A cat once indifferent to the royal household began following her silently, brushing against her legs as if recognizing some innate authority in her essence. Birds that had refused to perch near servants now circled above her, their eyes sharp and attentive, a silent acknowledgement of the light that remained in her despite the stolen face. These small but significant occurrences reminded Zephyra that her identity, though masked, was not extinguished. It existed in resonance, perception, and spirit. Among the common folk and servants she mingled with to remain unseen, Zephyra discovered pockets of kindness and curiosity. A few children, untainted by courtly politics, instinctively recognized the difference between her true aura and the stepmother's manufactured image. Their laughter, pure and unprejudiced, brought a flicker of hope to her days, and she began to realize that influence and presence were not solely dictated by outward appearances. Her movements through markets, kitchens, and alleyways were careful yet purposeful, as she observed, learned, and adapted. It was here that she began to notice subtle clues of her stolen identity scattered throughout the kingdom. A pendant once gifted by the king that retained a glimmer of her aura, a portrait slightly warped by magic in the gallery, and mirrors that, when approached with intent, reflected fragments of her original visage. Each piece became a thread in the tapestry she would one day weave to reclaim her true self. Meanwhile, in the palace, cracks in the stepmother's facade began to emerge. Courtiers noticed inconsistencies, small slippages in demeanor, and fleeting expressions that betrayed the carefully crafted mask of perfection. Rumors began to ripple through the court, whispers of a false queen, a mysterious girl seen fleetingly among servants, and the unsettling sense that the magical balance had been disrupted. Some ministers, skeptical yet cautious, began questioning decisions that seemed influenced by vanity rather than wisdom, noting subtle missteps in governance that had previously been unthinkable under a ruler as manipulative and composed as Queen Malika. These murmurs, though faint at first, carried with them the latent tension that the kingdom itself sensed the presence of truth waiting to be revealed. Zephyra, guided by instinct and the whispers of the mystical, began collecting and observing these fragments of her stolen self. She found that certain objects responded to her touch, glowing faintly or vibrating with recognition. A crystal goblet in the royal kitchen shimmered when she held it, revealing the faint outline of her face in its reflection. An embroidered tapestry depicting the royal lineage flickered with movement when she approached, hinting at gaps in the stepmother's deception. Even a small, enchanted birdcage in the garden seemed to hum with her energy, acknowledging her rightful place in the kingdom. Each discovery strengthened her resolve and confirmed that the magic used against her, though powerful, could not sever the intrinsic connection between her identity and the kingdom she belonged to. In the quiet hours of the night, Zephyra often stood alone in the shadowed corners of the palace, feeling the rhythm of the kingdom pulse around her. Though unseen, her presence was no longer passive. It resonated with life, hope, and quiet power. She realized that her stolen face had not diminished her essence. It had sharpened her perception, strengthened her cunning, and drawn her closer to forces both mystical and natural that recognized truth beyond appearances. The journey ahead would require patience, strategy, and courage, but even in shadows, Zephyra's light endured. The kingdom might have been fooled for a time, but the fragments of her identity and the subtle recognition of those attuned to truth ensured that the day of reckoning was coming, and when it did, she would not merely reclaim her face, she would reclaim her kingdom and her rightful place in history. Deep within the palace, hidden behind layers of carved ebony and gilded panels, stood the mirror that had forever changed Zephyra's life. It was no ordinary glass, no mere reflection of flesh and features. The surface shimmered as though it were liquid, flowing subtly even when untouched, capturing not just appearances but the essence of those who dared to look into it. This was the mirror Queen Malika had used to steal Zephyra's face, a relic steeped in forbidden magic, and its power extended far beyond the mere transformation of features. For many, it remained a silent, inscrutable object, but for Zephyra, it soon became something far more complex, alive in ways that startled and intrigued her. At first, Zephyra approached the mirror with caution. Its smooth surface seemed to pulse faintly, as if sensing her presence, and tiny ripples of light danced across its frame in response to her emotions. When she looked into it, she did not see the face imposed by her stepmother's spell, nor the reflections of the common corridors she now roamed. Instead, fleeting fragments of her true visage appeared, interwoven with memories of laughter, sunlight, and moments when she had been acknowledged and loved. The mirror did not merely reflect what was. It spoke in the subtlest of ways, whispering truths and possibilities through the ripples in its surface, vibrating with energy that resonated in the very marrow of her bones. As she spent time in quiet observation, Zafira realized that she could interact with the mirror. A gentle touch on the smooth glass caused images to shift and rearrange, revealing scenes of her past. Her mother smiling in the sunlit gardens, the first time she had walked the palace halls with confidence, and moments when her kindness had touched the lives of commoners and courtiers alike. Each reflection was accompanied by subtle whispers, urging recognition, resilience, and patience. The mirror seemed to acknowledge her pain and her determination, rewarding her careful attention with new insights and glimpses of her stolen identity. It was as though the magic that had bound her face to another had not completely severed her connection to herself, and the mirror had become a medium through which that bond endured. Among these reflections, the mirror offered more than just memories, it presented guidance. The images of past queens appeared, not as mere likenesses, but as teachers, warning of the dangers inherent in vanity, envy, and unchecked ambition. They spoke to her through the shifting images, showing the consequences of greed and manipulation, as well as the strength and dignity that a ruler might embody when guided by wisdom and compassion. These visions instilled in Zafira a deeper understanding of her role, not merely as a victim of theft but as someone destined to wield influence for justice and integrity. The mirror's lessons were precise yet subtle, teaching her that reclaiming her identity would require strategy, courage, and an unwavering commitment to truth. The magical mirror also hinted at the mechanics of her potential reclamation. When she concentrated, the glass shimmered in response, revealing symbols, runes, and faint patterns embedded within the surface. They spoke in a language older than the palace itself, ancient glyphs that carried instructions, warnings, and promises of empowerment. The mirror suggested that her true face could be restored, but only if she approached the challenge with both discernment and patience. Every vision, every whisper, seemed to test her understanding and her resolve, ensuring that her intentions were guided by justice rather than mere desire for revenge. As Zafira grew more attuned to the mirror, she began to notice its subtle interactions with the world around her. Reflections in ordinary surfaces seemed to respond, faint echoes of her own energy, while the whispers carried a cadence that resonated beyond the glass. It became clear that the mirror was not merely a passive instrument but an active participant, a sentient force aligned with truth and fairness. Its judgments were impartial, its guidance precise, and its eventual role as an arbiter of justice within the kingdom increasingly apparent. The magical relic had witnessed the stepmother's treachery, absorbed the consequences of her vanity, and now awaited the one who could restore balance. Through this growing bond, Zafira's determination solidified. She realized that the stolen face was only one aspect of her broader struggle, that reclaiming her identity meant confronting deception, manipulation, and injustice at every level. The mirror, both guide and witness, had chosen her as its partner, revealing that her destiny was intertwined with the fate of the kingdom itself. In its shimmering depths, the promise of redemption glimmered, a path to reclaim her true self, restore justice, and ensure that no spell, no deception, could override the essence of what it meant to be the rightful queen. Zafira knew that reclaiming her rightful place in the kingdom of Illumera would require more than courage alone. She would need allies who could see beyond the illusions and deceptions that now surrounded her. In the quiet moments of her exile, she began reaching out to those who might recognize her true essence. Among the palace staff, a few trusted servants remembered the princess's kindness, loyalty, and innate wisdom. They approached her cautiously, eyes wide with fear and curiosity, sensing that the girl they now encountered carried the same spirit of leadership and justice they had once admired. These early allies, though humble, became the foundation of a network that would eventually extend across the kingdom. Beyond the palace, Zafira sought the counsel of wise elders, those who had seen the rise and fall of rulers and who understood that true authority rested not in appearances but in knowledge, foresight, and integrity. These advisors had often whispered of the magic that bound the stepmother's deception, recognizing signs that the kingdom's balance had been disrupted. They taught Zafira how to observe subtleties in behavior, how to discern truth in whispers and gestures, and how to anticipate the schemes that Malika wove so carefully. In their guidance, Zafira found not only mentorship but also affirmation that her cause was just and necessary. Even the natural world seemed to respond to her presence. Mystical creatures, long hidden in the forests surrounding Illumera or confined by ancient enchantments, appeared to her, drawn by an instinctive recognition of her essence. Birds with iridescent plumage perched nearby, observing silently. Foxes and other woodland animals became her eyes and ears, carrying messages and relaying warnings. Inanimate objects imbued with latent magic, a wind chime in the courtyard, an enchanted crystal in the palace garden, responded to her subtle energies, signaling that her influence extended beyond human allies. These beings, mystical and perceptive, became an integral part of her growing circle, offering insights that no ordinary observation could provide. The magical mirror, her constant companion, remained central to this coalition. Its surface, now attuned to her presence and intentions, provided crucial intelligence about the palace, the stepmother's movements and vulnerabilities within the court. Reflections shifted to reveal hidden passages, whispered conversations, and subtle gestures that indicated loyalty or deception. The mirror did not act independently, it required Zephyra's focus and intent to channel its guidance effectively. In learning to interpret its messages, she refined her ability to perceive layers of reality unseen by ordinary eyes, strengthening her capacity to strategize with precision. Zephira also began to train herself rigorously, honing skills that went beyond physical strength or traditional magic. Her perception sharpened to detect hidden motives and subtleties in speech, her wit became honed for navigating the labyrinthine politics of the palace, and her understanding of subtle magic, the kind woven into mirrors, reflections, and the natural world, deepened. Through disciplined practice, she learned to manipulate shadows, nudge events without direct confrontation, and use presence and intention to influence outcomes subtly. Each day she grew stronger, more confident, and more capable, even without the face that had once defined her beauty. With allies both mortal and mystical, Zephira's power became increasingly tangible, though not immediately visible. Her presence was felt in the rustle of leaves, the cautious glances of servants, and the whispers of the mirror. Each small victory, every revelation, and every act of insight reinforced the network she was building, demonstrating that authority and influence need not rely solely on appearances. Though Malika's spell had stolen her face, it could not diminish the essence, intelligence, or resolve that defined Zephira. In time, she would turn these subtle forces into a coordinated plan, exposing the stepmother's deception and reclaiming her rightful place as the true queen, guided by wisdom, strategy, and the unshakable recognition of her own identity. The stepmother's confidence in her stolen beauty seemed unshakable, and she took every opportunity to display it before the court and the people. Grand ceremonies were staged, each designed to flaunt her elegance and reinforce the illusion that she alone embodied the grace and virtue of the royal family. Her carefully rehearsed gestures, polished words, and meticulously arranged appearances were intended to convince all observers that the kingdom's rightful princess had been replaced, that Zephira's absence was final, and that no challenge could pierce the veneer of perfection she projected. Every public act, however, carried within it the seeds of doubt, for magic, no matter how potent, cannot entirely replicate essence, and subtle inconsistencies began to emerge beneath the dazzling surface. Zephira, observing from shadows and guided by her growing circle of loyal allies, began noticing these cracks. Courtiers who had long studied the subtle language of presence, gestures, and expression started whispering among themselves when the stepmother's composure faltered, when her smile appeared forced, or when a carefully recited phrase lacked the natural warmth that once belonged to the royal family. Zephira, attuned to these nuances and aided by the mirror's insight, identified moments when the stepmother's illusion wavered. Through careful timing and subtle interventions, she began exposing these fractures without revealing her own presence. A misdirected bow, a faint hesitation in speech, or a shadow crossing the queen's expression became clues that Zephira could use to tip the balance of perception. The mirror played an indispensable role in this strategy. Its surface shimmered with latent energy, whispering guidance in a voice that only Zephira could hear. It indicated which ceremonies offered the most influence, which courtiers were most susceptible to doubt, and how the smallest act could be amplified to reveal the truth beneath the artifice. With each whisper, the mirror reminded her that patience and timing were as critical as courage and power. The young princess learned to anticipate the stepmother's moves, to plant seeds of doubt in subtle ways, and to rely on perception and cunning as much as on any mystical intervention. Every action was measured, deliberate, and calculated to expose the falsehood of the stolen identity without triggering a direct confrontation prematurely. As the court and citizens began observing more closely, their own perceptions began to shift. Rumors, whispers, and fleeting doubts circulated quietly, growing stronger with every small inconsistency in the queen's displays. People remembered the warmth, kindness, and authentic presence that had once belonged to the princess, and the stepmother's meticulously crafted facade could not entirely overwrite memory. Even minor signs, a glance that lacked empathy, a misstep in etiquette or a fleeting expression of impatience, were magnified by perception, feeding the sense that something was amiss. Citizens who had once accepted the queen's image without question now began to question appearances, sensing that the truth had not been fully erased. Zafira also used her network of allies strategically. Trusted servants, observant elders and mystical creatures watched carefully, relaying information about court events and public reactions. Their guidance helped Zafira determine when and how to act, ensuring that each subtle exposure of the stepmother's deception would ripple effectively through the court and beyond. The mirror confirmed her judgments, revealing hidden opportunities and warning of risks, creating a delicate balance between action and restraint. Zafira's intelligence and foresight became a force as potent as any visible display of magic or power. Through these careful, patient maneuvers, the stage for a climactic confrontation began to take shape. The tension between truth and falsehood, authenticity and deception, grew ever more palpable, felt not just by Zafira and her allies but by the court and citizens alike. Every misstep of the stepmother, every subtle reveal orchestrated by Zafira, edged the kingdom closer to revelation. The moment of reckoning loomed on the horizon, a collision between the stolen identity and the rightful princess, guided by wisdom, courage, and the unyielding insistence of truth. In this balance, Zafira understood that the power of patience, perception, and strategic action could accomplish what force alone never could: the reclamation of her face, her essence, and her rightful place as the true queen of Olumara. The mirror, long a silent witness to the palace's schemes, began to stir in ways Zafira had only just begun to comprehend. Its surface, once reactive only to her touch and focus, now seemed to pulse with a will of its own. Subtle vibrations shimmered through the glass, rippling outward into the room even when she approached cautiously, as though it were preparing to act independently. Zafira felt a mixture of awe and apprehension, sensing that the mirror had judged her readiness for the next stage of her journey. It had observed her patience, her strategic maneuvering, and the careful cultivation of allies, and now it seemed poised to reveal truths long concealed by deception and ambition. One evening, as sunlight glimmered across the ornate palace corridors, the mirror's surface shifted dramatically. The liquid-like shimmer expanded, filling the room with faint, multicolored light that played across walls and floors. Within the depths of the glass, visions began to form. Zafira saw the stepmother, Queen Malika, performing her intricate spell to steal the princess's face. The image was precise and deliberate, capturing not only the act itself but the subtle manipulations of court staff who were coerced or deceived into complicity. The mirror did not spare details. The expressions of Malika's envy, her satisfaction in seeing the rightful princess cast aside, and the growing hold she maintained over the kingdom were all displayed without distortion. Zafira absorbed the visions in silence, understanding fully for the first time the magnitude of the betrayal she had endured. As the mirror continued its revelations, it expanded the narrative beyond the act of theft. Zafira witnessed the ripple effects throughout Olumara: the fear among servants, the quiet despair of those who had recognized her true identity, and the subtle decay of trust among the citizens who had been fooled by appearances. It revealed how Malika's vanity had blinded the court to injustice, allowing corruption to take root, and how the stolen face had served not just as a personal attack on Zafira but as a symbol of manipulation that undermined the entire kingdom. These visions evoked both sorrow and resolve in Zafira, deepening her understanding of the stakes involved in reclaiming her rightful place. The mirror's power extended further still. It began to respond to Zafira's intent, showing her ways to project her original face and essence into the world. With concentration and focus, Zafira could cause brief, shimmering glimpses of her true visage to appear before the court and her allies. These projections were not illusions but extensions of her inner self, revealing her authenticity in a form that the magical mirror had chosen to amplify. Each projection strengthened the recognition of her true identity among those who still believed in her virtue, and the stepmother's facade began to falter under this subtle yet undeniable influence. The mirror also tested Zafira's character. Through visions and whispers, it challenged her motivations, probing whether her desire for restoration was rooted in pride, vengeance, or justice. It presented moral dilemmas, scenarios in which the reclamation of her face could be achieved through harm, deceit, or manipulation, and then juxtaposed alternatives that required patience, wisdom, and fairness. Zafira navigated each test with care, guided by her own integrity and the lessons she had absorbed from her mystical allies. She realized that the mirror was not merely a tool or a weapon but a judge, ensuring that any action taken in her name would be tempered by righteousness and guided by a pure heart. As these trials continued, Zephyra sensed the foreshadowing of the final revelation. The mirror had not acted until the precise moment when her allies were ready, when the court had begun questioning appearances, and when she herself had grown fully capable of channeling its power responsibly. Every whisper, every ripple in the glass, seemed to signal the impending climax, the day when the stolen face would be returned, the stepmother's deceit exposed, and the kingdom's balance restored. Zephyra's heart surged with anticipation and resolve, knowing that the mirror had chosen her, not merely to reclaim a visage, but to ensure that justice would be undeniable, absolute, and witnessed by all. In this profound moment of alignment, Zephyra understood the mirror's ultimate purpose. It was not only a recorder of crime and theft but an arbiter of truth and consequence, a guardian of justice whose judgment would manifest through her actions. As the magical surface shimmered and pulsed, Zephyra felt her essence and identity coalesce, ready to shine forth in full clarity, poised to reveal the rightful queen and to hold the stepmother accountable in a manner both fair and irrevocable. The final act, long anticipated, was now imminent, guided by the wisdom and power of the mirror itself. Zephyra's moment of reckoning arrived with quiet certainty. Guided by the mirror and surrounded by her loyal allies, she entered the palace, her presence calm yet commanding, each step measured to convey both dignity and inevitability. The halls that once echoed with her absence now seemed to hold their breath, sensing a change, an energy that had been dormant yet never defeated. Courtiers and servants glanced nervously as she approached, some recognizing the subtle radiance of her essence, others sensing only a shift in the air, a stirring of power that could no longer be ignored. The mirror, held before her with deliberate focus, began its work. Its surface shimmered with an ethereal glow, expanding and filling the room with light that refracted into every corner of the grand chamber. Within its depths, Zephyra's true face appeared, luminous and unmistakable, radiating the kindness, wisdom and courage that the stolen visage had attempted to conceal. The projection was not an illusion to deceive but a revelation of truth, an undeniable testament to her identity. The court gasped collectively, unable to deny the authenticity emanating from the mirror's enchanted surface. Whispers of recognition and awe spread swiftly, echoing the long-suppressed memories of the princess's presence and virtue. Simultaneously, the mirror revealed the stepmother's deceit in stark clarity. Every enchantment, every act of manipulation, every stolen gesture of beauty was displayed for all to see. The projection traced the steps of Malika's treachery, from the moment the forbidden spell was cast to the daily lies that maintained the illusion of her authority. Courtiers who had been loyal out of fear now recoiled at the undeniable evidence, their expressions a mix of shock, anger, and vindication. Even the king, long misled and manipulated, stared in disbelief as the truth unfolded before his eyes. The weight of his error pressed upon him, mingled with relief and grief, as he recognized both the injustice done to his daughter and the courage she had displayed in reclaiming her rightful place. Malika's reaction was immediate and frantic. She attempted to speak, to cast doubt upon the projections, to dismiss the revelations as trickery or magic beyond comprehension. But the mirror, attuned to Zephyra's intent and the truth of the situation, resisted all efforts at denial. Its magic bound her influence, revealing her lies and amplifying her fear, rendering her powerless to manipulate the witnesses. The stepmother's beauty, once a weapon, now betrayed her, becoming a mask that could not withstand the light of honesty and revelation. Every attempt to flee or disrupt the display was met with resistance from the mirror, which seemed to act as both judge and enforcer, ensuring that deception could not prevail. Zephyra approached with measured calm, her demeanor exuding both authority and compassion. She spoke not with anger but with clarity, articulating the injustices committed and the harm caused by Malika's ambition. Her words were reinforced by the mirror's projections, leaving no room for doubt or denial. Citizens, courtiers, and palace staff absorbed the truth collectively, the undeniable evidence fostering a sense of justice restored rather than revenge exacted. In that moment, Zephyra's mastery of both her identity and the magical mirror became apparent. She wielded power not as a weapon for vengeance but as a tool for revelation, guidance, and moral authority. The stepmother, confronted with the full consequences of her actions, was rendered immobile by the mirror's magic, her spells nullified and her influence dissipated. The mirror acted as a mediator, enforcing justice without unnecessary cruelty. Malika was either bound, her movements restricted until the kingdom could decide her fate, or transformed in a manner that symbolized the undoing of her deceit, a living reflection of the vanity and corruption she had nurtured. Zephyra's restraint in the execution of justice demonstrated her wisdom and the depth of her character, earning the admiration of the kingdom and solidifying her legitimacy as the true heir. As the hall settled, the murmurs of awe and relief rippled through the assembled crowd. The mirror's glow softened, reflecting Zephyra's face one final time, now fully restored and inseparable from her essence. She had reclaimed what was stolen, not merely through magic but through patience, strategy, and the unwavering assertion of truth. The people saw in her not only beauty and lineage but courage, intellect, and fairness, the qualities that defined a true queen. With the stepmother subdued and the kingdom's perception realigned, Zephyra stood poised to lead, her authority validated and her identity irrevocably restored. With the stepmother's deception fully revealed and her influence neutralized, the atmosphere in the palace shifted from tension to cautious relief. The king, previously blinded by vanity and manipulation, now faced the weight of his misjudgment. Seeing the undeniable truth projected by the mirror and understanding the extent to which his daughter had been wronged, he experienced a profound mixture of guilt, remorse, and awakening. He acknowledged not only the injustice done to Zephyra but also the broader consequences of allowing deceit and ambition to overshadow wisdom and discernment within the court. This recognition marked the first step toward restoring balance and order to a kingdom that had suffered under the illusion of false authority. Zephyra, with poise and clarity, began the meticulous process of reclaiming her rightful position. She moved deliberately through the halls of the palace, her presence commanding respect and quiet awe from all who beheld her. Courtiers, servants, and nobles alike recognized not only her restored beauty but the wisdom, courage, and integrity she embodied. Every step she took reaffirmed her authority, and the subtle power emanating from the mirror reinforced the legitimacy of her position. Where fear and manipulation had once ruled, now insight, fairness, and authenticity guided the court. The mirror itself remained at the center of this transformation, not merely as a magical artifact but as a symbol of truth and justice. Its reflective surface now radiated calm, balanced energy, serving as a reminder to the king, the court, and the citizens that vigilance was essential in preserving harmony and accountability. Through its presence, Zephyra ensured that future leaders and advisors would understand the consequences of deceit and the enduring power of authenticity. The mirror became a living emblem of moral clarity, its influence encouraging transparency and reinforcing the principles that would guide Olumara for generations. Reforms were introduced gradually, blending authority with empathy. Zephyra addressed the lingering unrest among courtiers, reinstated loyal and competent advisors, and re-established policies that had been neglected or abused under the stepmother's reign. She encouraged the voices of citizens to be heard, balancing tradition with justice and creating a governance system rooted in fairness and respect. The court learned to value integrity over appearances, and the people, witnessing the restoration of balance, felt renewed faith in the monarchy and in the principles that governed their daily lives. The mystical allies who had aided Zephyra in her struggle gradually retreated, returning to forests, hidden groves, and enchanted realms. Yet, their departure was not one of absence but of presence in subtle ways. Traces of protection lingered in the palace gardens, faint enchantments guarded strategic locations, and symbols of harmony were woven into the fabric of the kingdom. Citizens felt the lingering reassurance of unseen guardians, a quiet testament to the collaboration between human virtue and mystical guidance. Their retreat marked the completion of Zephyra's journey from powerless exile to wise and empowered ruler, leaving behind a kingdom strengthened by both human judgment and mystical oversight. As celebrations erupted throughout Olumara, the citizens rejoiced not merely for the restoration of the princess but for the triumph of truth over falsehood, authenticity over pretense. Markets filled with laughter, festivals returned to their vibrant rhythms, and the palace resonated with a renewed sense of purpose and order. Zephyra's leadership became a beacon of hope and inspiration, demonstrating that courage, patience, and integrity could overcome even the most insidious manipulations. The mirror, ever watchful, served as a subtle reminder that justice and vigilance are ongoing responsibilities, ensuring that neither deceit nor vanity could destabilize the kingdom again. Through these combined efforts, the king's acknowledgement, the reforms, the reinstatement of order, and the symbolic presence of the mirror, Zephyra succeeded in restoring the kingdom to a state of balance and harmony. The people felt both empowered and protected, understanding that a ruler who embodies truth and justice safeguards not only the monarchy but the very essence of the kingdom itself. Zephyra turned her attention to the deeper, lasting work of cultivating wisdom and ethical guidance among her people. A testament to the power of authenticity, true leadership extended beyond reclaiming her rightful place. It required teaching the kingdom the lessons she had learned through hardship, deception, and magical intervention. Central to this effort was the mirror, once a tool of crime and secrecy, now transformed into an instrument of insight, education, and moral reflection. Its magical surface became a guide for citizens, courtiers, and future rulers, projecting not only Zephyra's restored visage but also stories, visions, and reminders of the consequences of vanity, deceit, and greed. Zephyra organized gatherings and rituals in which the mirror played a central role. Citizens, from nobles to commoners, were invited to witness lessons of integrity and truth, observing the mirror's reflections and projections as interactive demonstrations of ethical principles. These sessions were not meant to intimidate but to enlighten. The mirror displayed scenarios in which choices led to virtue or corruption, allowing observers to see firsthand the ripple effects of human actions. By integrating mystical guidance with tangible examples, Zephyra ensured that the kingdom internalized the moral lessons in a way that simple words could never achieve. Children grew up learning the importance of honesty, servants understood the dangers of blind obedience, and the court developed a culture of accountability and scrutiny. The stories of her stolen face became central to this educational approach. Tales circulated widely, carried by travelers, scribes, and storytellers, recounting Zephyra's ordeal, her patience, and her clever use of allies in the mirror to reclaim her identity. These narratives were more than folklore. They were living lessons, reinforcing the idea that external beauty and appearances could never replace truth, wisdom, and moral fortitude. The citizens learned to value inner strength, vigilance, and fairness, cultivating a societal awareness that protected the kingdom from manipulation or corruption. Even those who had once doubted her authenticity came to revere Zephyra as both a ruler and a teacher. The mirror, meanwhile, was carefully integrated into the structure of governance. It became a tool for advising the king and council, projecting potential consequences of decisions and revealing subtle deceptions before they could take root. Zephyra used it to balance human governance with awareness of mystical forces, demonstrating that power and responsibility required attention to both tangible and intangible realms. The mirror's lessons were always grounded in ethics, never employed to dominate or punish unnecessarily, ensuring that its influence reinforced justice rather than fear. It reminded the kingdom that vigilance was ongoing, that the choices of leaders and citizens alike shaped the prosperity and harmony of Olumara. Under Zephyra's guidance, the kingdom prospered. Crops flourished, trade revived, and the people embraced a culture of respect, fairness, and communal responsibility. Ethical rule became intertwined with mystical awareness, forging a society that valued both reason and intuition, human judgment and magical insight. Citizens learned to look beyond appearances, to question authority when necessary, and to uphold truth as a foundation of community life. Festivals celebrated not only the kingdom's wealth and beauty but also the triumph of integrity and the enduring lessons of reflection, reminding all generations that vigilance and wisdom must coexist with governance. In this way, Zephyra's story, and the presence of the mirror, ensured that Olumara would never again be swayed by vanity, deceit, or greed. The kingdom thrived not only because a rightful ruler had been restored but because the people had learned to value the principles that had guided her journey. Justice, honesty, ethical awareness, and respect for both human and mystical forces became the pillars of society, embedding in the culture the knowledge that appearances could deceive, but truth, when pursued with patience, courage, and wisdom, would always prevail. Zephyra's legacy endured, a kingdom shaped not only by rulership but by lessons of reflection that inspired vigilance, integrity, and prosperity for generations to come.